All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming here. Appreciate your time and effort and energy you put in here. Today's the Friday, so I'm sure you guys want to come home and just kick back, and hopefully you guys are not working this weekend, right? Some of us do. As a matter of fact, I came here on vacation, so it's more like workation at this point, right? So we're staying at the Westgate resorts. So it's very nice, actually. I didn't expect it would be that nice, but so I give you a little bit background what I do. I'm actually a team member of Bianca here, and she's been doing very well in real estate. And I don't know how well known her, but we've been trying to keep in touch with everybody as much as possible. And what I get to do in her company is to actually help her get everybody ready for the purchase of their home. So what I do is I do the mortgage side of this. So put it this way, it makes a big difference when we're actually working our way through this process to understand how we can get approved for the mortgage. If you guys have any idea in terms of like the amount of work it takes, sometimes people don't realize how important it is to. Give me 1 second, this thing's not cooperating. Here you go. There you go. How important it is to understand the process of being able to get a mortgage. And today, that's what I'm going to be discussing with you. Even though I've actually had 30 years of real estate experience, and I actually do business here in Florida. I work for her. That's basically how it goes. So the way we do things is we start you off by getting you approved, getting an idea exactly what's in your credit. And there's a lot of things, a lot of factors. And today we're going to be discussing a lot of factors that affect your credit. And not only your credit, but also many ways to save money. This is something that we're going to be discussing today. So a couple of things when you walk away from this event is one thing you're going to have a better understanding how credit works. Okay. Another thing that you're going to walk away from this is being able to understand where we can get down payment assistance if we need more money. Sometimes we think that we have all the money in the world, but then when it comes time to purchasing a home, a lot of emergencies come up, and you would definitely need to have reserves when you're trying to purchase a home. You cannot just go out there and purchase a home without actually having an understanding that you need probably a good 3 to 6 months of reserves to be able to actually kind of be comfortable owning a property. Now, to some of you guys, more conservative ones, you want a year, maybe 5 years. No, you don't need any. You don't need that much. And that's the thing. People don't realize renting and owning a home. Okay, the biggest difference is your mortgage. And when you're looking at a mortgage, right, the nice thing about owning a property is your mortgage. Because if you ever fall behind on your mortgage, they don't kick you out right away. They give you a forbearance sometimes, or they give you a loan modification sometimes. So if you lost your job, they sometimes hold your mortgage for not paying for 3 months or 6 months, which I've seen banks do. Yeah, exactly, right? It's a surprise. But what happens if you're renting? And within 3 months or quicker, actually, they get in 2 weeks, that stuff is out the door, right? And people don't realize the importance of that. Do you have a question? Oh, it's across the board. Yeah, it's across the board. We're talking about owning a property versus renting a property. Your mortgage makes a difference. I'm telling you right now. And people don't realize, I mean, outside of everything that she's going to be talking to you guys about, the mortgage part of this makes a big difference, because when you're trying to move things along in terms of your monthly income, you have more room to have things go wrong. And if it does go wrong, you'll become best friends with your bank representative, and your bank representative is like, oh, okay, let me go ahead and see what I can do for you. Fill out this paperwork, send it back, and then we're going to go ahead and figure out a way to actually keep you into the mortgage. And sometimes they've actually seen them over time when you're able to actually catch up, let's say, or you're trying to catch up and you're so behind. I've seen banks actually get rid of like your in arrears kind of thing. I mean, would your landlord ever do that to you? No. That's the biggest difference. I've seen people negotiate like $80,000 of their behind on their mortgage, and the bank actually literally writes it off. Yeah. So if you're not aware of these things, now that you're actually been here, with a 30 years of experience, and I've actually done loan modifications and actually forbearances with clients that I work with. So that's why I'm very in tune in this part of this stuff. There's ways to actually get around certain things which you cannot do with your landlord, what you could do with the mortgage. So it's a big difference. Not every bank works the same way. Okay. So and not every person works the same way. So if you come across a representative that's not having a good day, I mean, man, let me tell you something. I mean, it's not your day either. So you got to keep trying and figure out who you're going to end up having that's actually be more lenient or actually willing to help you. That's the biggest difference. When you own a property, your mortgage actually helps you be able to keep the property in the long term. And especially during the Obama days, when they actually had this, this Obamacare program, when they actually came in and, what do you call this? Obama, when they actually they're able to do the loan modification through the Obama program that they had in 2008, 9, 10 to like 14 or 15. You're able to actually like reduce your monthly payment, reduce your interest rate, and all those things. Yeah. Yeah, yes. And a lot of people are not aware of this. Are you aware of this? Exactly. So this is the reason why you're here, because what you're trying to do is educate yourself on the things that you're not familiar with, and being able to actually kind of take that, and be able to kind of move forward with it and figure out what you're going to do next, right? So today we're going to be discussing several things. Credit score. What affects your credit and how does it affect your credit in that sense? So this is the kind of things that we're going to be covering today. So understanding your credit. Your credit score is a representation of your credit worthiness. They use that as a gauge. It's not a dead set thing that you actually can, but there is a bottom number that a lot of the desktop underwriting or the LP, the other program that's actually Freddie Mac. So you got Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. They lend, I would say, a good 50% of the loans out there that's actually insured by, remember, Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae at some point was mostly owned by the government when the market crashed, right? So they are regulated by the government. They're insured through the Fannie Mae program, which what insurance means basically, the banks has to follow a particular guideline for you to get approved. And if they do follow it, then that's considered an insured by a particular organization like Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. Those are conventional loans, right? And then you have FHA that's insured by the federal government, which a lot of us actually, like I would say in the other, maybe another 40% of it actually, or even more, are FHA loans that are being lent out there. So there's a lot of conventional loans and a lot of FHA loans, and those are insured by those organizations. What they insure is 20% of the whole amount loaned to you. That's the reason why there's a scenario where if you put 20% down on a conventional loan, the mortgage insurance premium actually goes away. I don't know if you're familiar with that. MIP. Mortgage insurance premium is actually is a insurance that you pay so you don't default on the bank. So the bank got smart, like, hey, I want you to get insurance against yourself, just in case you decide not to make payments. 20% of the money that we lend you is actually insured, which means it's going to go back to the bank. Really? Yeah. And then when they foreclose on your property, whatever the difference is, basically they give it back to you if there's any equity in it. And if there's no equity in it, basically they take that whatever loss it is. The reason why 20% is a magic number for them is because properties actually normally don't go below 20% when they fall, when they go down. But then we had the situation in 2008, 9, and 10 when some properties were 50% off, especially here in Florida. We had actually properties that went down like 50%. So the banks were taking losses. And I don't know if you remember that days, a lot of banks went out of business. Hundreds, I mean, we're talking about hundreds, in the hundreds, banks were going out of business because even though they're insured 20%, they were losing like 30, 40% of their portfolio. There was no way for them to sustain with so many people actually foreclosing. they ended up shutting down the banks. Basically, they ended up, going bankrupt. The banks going bankrupt, and that's why you had all these, countrywide, all these banks. Actually, Bank of America was in trouble at some point. Wells Fargo got in trouble at some point. You hear this on the news, right? Yeah. It's all downplayed, but this is the reason behind that, right? It's because they were not actually expecting that the loss were so big. But there was a big advantage for homeowners at the time as well. There were people that, of course, lost their homes if they were not well informed. But if you were well informed, you're able to actually maneuver through that whole, rough waters of being able to actually get the bank to actually cooperate with you. So when things go wrong, just keep in mind, once you own the home, okay, and you have a mortgage, call your bank. If you're anticipating that you're going to be losing your job like in the next month or two, start communicating with your bank. Hey, say, listen, what can I do? They'll give you some, they'll send you some forms. You might be able to actually start working on forbearance already before, all these things happen. So then you can keep your credit intact as much as possible. So you have more options to be able to do things like refinancing or doing other things or getting a second mortgage if you actually have equity on the property already. So that's the biggest thing about understanding this part. So we're looking at basically the banks are looking at your credit score as a way of gauging what kind of risk they're taking. So the higher your credit score is, the less risk the bank is taking. But that's what we call compensating factor. That's only one factor. There's a lot of other factors. How long have you been at work in the same type of work that you're doing, on the same type of company that you work at? That's another one. And also, what are your ratios? Like how much debts do you have versus how much income you have? And all those things are calculated in that sense as well. So you also actually, so all those things factor in. Now your credit is actually looked at in different ways, how your credit can go up or down. Sometimes paying off your credit card, like paying off to zero, is not always good for your credit. It's so weird the way they have it set up, but a lot of the times, if you actually bring it below 30%, usually it's going to benefit you. That particular credit starts to benefit your credit score to go up. But if you actually pay it off completely, it's not always going to help you. Sometimes it brings it down for a month or two and it brings it back up, I guess, after that. But so you always need to analyze that. And the way you're going to do that is very simple. Call us, because we have access to all that stuff. We can see exactly where your credit is. We even have a connection directly connected to the credit bureau where we can adjust your credit score within 48 hours. Or within, well, you pay a little bit more for the 48 hours. Like FedEx overnight versus like FedEx 3 days. Yeah, absolutely. So looking at it from what you need to happen makes a big difference. I think if you're able to know exactly what to pay off, when to pay off, how to pay off, and what time frame you're looking at, right? You can already start planning. Makes sense, right? So this is a very important aspect of mortgage and how we can move things along on this part. So that's the part of the credit report, right? And so what we do a lot of the times is what happens in this case, your credit report comprises of any public information they can find and any companies that report to the credit bureau. Some of your landlord might report to the credit bureau if you haven't been paying. A lot of times they don't even report that you're actually paying your rent, but the minute that you actually become behind, they start reporting you. So I mean, it would be nice if some landlords will actually just report the good stuff also as well as the bad stuff. But a lot of times you end up with the bad stuff. Now, here's what happens. People think that there's no solution to this. There is. If you've never been late on your creditor, you can always call your creditor. And if you got the right person at some point, because you keep calling them, right? You can get rid of this one late here or one late there. People don't know this. But since you're in this class, I figured, in this seminar, I would want to explain to you that nothing is definite. Everything can be maneuvered around, which means I've seen PayPal actually, when I personally had a late payment with PayPal one day, and And I called PayPal. They're like, oh, nothing I can do. Called the next person. Nothing I can do. Next person, nothing I can do. Eventually, I think they get tired of me calling, and they're like, you know what, let me do something about it. Send us a letter. We'll go ahead and take care of it. And then they took care of it, and they took it out. Because we've never been late. You see? And your being late, believe it or not, is the most damaging of your credit. Because that's really, especially within the 12 months. Which means if you're late, like recently, like last month, guess what? You have to wait 12 months before you can get a mortgage loan sometimes, depending on what's your credit look like at that point. So it's very important, even if it's $5 that you didn't pay, they could report you on it, which is insane, right? I mean, it's such a small amount, but it's significant to the bank that you're making your payments on time. Your minimum payments make a difference. The way I do it, if it helps you any, is you put it on a spreadsheet. Put it on a spreadsheet, everything that you need to pay for every single month, and then you put January, February, March, April, May, June, just to make sure you don't miss anything. And you keep adding it if you actually have things that, if you have multiple things running, like utility bills or anything like that. Just make sure you organize yourself in such a way. The other way is actually using this thing called, I think they have a Rocket Money. That's actually you've seen it? Okay, I'm using it. I know exactly what's on my credit in terms of like, what's being paid. I have an idea exactly. It connects directly to the bank. I know exactly what I'm spending. It's very important to understand that in the United States, it's so easy to actually run around with a Visa, MasterCard, I mean, they make it so easy for us, don't they? And the problem is, you continue this direction without actually understanding how you can manage your money, you're not going to go anywhere. And believe me, I've actually had experience in that end. I mean, it's not what you make, it's how you track everything you spend. Because you can spend as much as you make or even more, and next thing you know, you're in trouble. Yeah. So that's what we got to be very careful of. And like I said, if you're ever in trouble, just contact us. We'll solve the problem for you. Because this is our expertise. This is what we do. And believe it or not, I got into the mortgage business after 30 years in real estate. I came to realize there's only a few lenders out there you can count on, because what they do a lot of times, they cherry pick which client they're going to work with. So if you have excellent credit, you've experienced that or no? Yeah? Some lenders kind of like, oh, well, you're not ready now. So and then they stop calling you. They don't care about you. They don't. Look, you are just as human as me, right? And all of us need to care for each other. That's what the bottom line is. If you want to actually succeed, you partner up with people that care about you. And what's happening in your world as well, in terms of like what needs to happen so you can actually own a place eventually. Yeah. So it's very, very important to actually connect this way. So credit scores, tips, prove where you live, build your credit history, pay your bills on time. This is the stuff that we just talked about, right? Keep your credit utilization low, which is under 30%. That's the key, under 30%. See if you could get an instant score boost. These instant score boosts we're talking about depends on where you are. A lot of the times, secure credit, if you haven't really built up any credit yet, secure credit is actually good. When I say secure credit, you go to the bank. Let's say you go to Bank of America or Citibank or any bank out there that actually does depository, and you tell them, hey, I want to get a secure credit card, and they'll give it to you, but you pay the amount that you're going to borrow. And it works when you're starting to rebuild your credit in this sense, right? And anything that you've actually had in the past, a lot of the times you can negotiate if it's been over 6 months, over 6 months to 8 months. Around the 8-month, 9-month time frame is when you can actually call them and try to actually get a negotiated settlement. Now, there's companies out there that actually call you and say, oh, you're going to consolidate your debt. I don't know. Yeah, okay. Please don't do that, because I can show you how to do that without having to actually pay somebody, and they're taking thousands of dollars, not hundreds, thousands of your money to actually ruin your credit. So if your credit is ruined anyway, right, this is the time to actually negotiate a settlement on each one that you actually cannot pay anymore. So during the time the market crash, I personally, going through a lot of like personal difficulties, was able to negotiate a $200,000 second mortgage on my property for paying off for $20,000. Yeah, and I did one for a guy who actually, one of my friends who are a bankruptcy attorney called me up. It's like, hey, Mark, I got this guy. I cannot actually bankrupt him. He makes $200,000 a year. I was like, really? What's the problem? Well, he owns 3 houses. They're all actually like upside down, and he owes over like $250,000 in credit cards. Can you help him out? So I sat down with the guy. He was actually like some big wig in one of the government contracting company. I mean, like, like really big time guy, like one of those Lockheed Martin, or like, he's like one of the directors. So I sat down with him and I'm like, okay, show me what you got. He showed me everything. Because I told him, send me everything that you have that you owe money to, and we'll figure it out. He owed money at 60,000 in one credit card. He had a black, one of those black cards from, I think it was
American
Chase.
Express or Chase.
Yeah. He had like, oh my goodness, like really, really like, like solid $100,000 credit line kind of thing, right? We started paying him off for like $5,000, $100,000 for 5,000. Some of them were actually like the smaller ones. It ends up being like 50%. If you only like owe $2,000, they might settle for like $500, depending how you negotiate, of course. Everything is depending on how you negotiate, okay? Bottom line is, it's out there for you to understand that we are consumers, that sometimes we get in trouble, and the system is so easy for us to actually spend our money that we don't even have anymore, right? So if you guys run into that kind of situation, of course, this is where we come in and actually, and ultimately the goal here is the biggest purchase you get to make is real estate, right? So getting a mortgage is the most important part. So before you buy a car, before you buy anything big purchase, right? Own a home. It's a good idea because you know what inflation looks like right now. I'm pretty sure everybody's feeling it, right? Is everybody feeling inflation? Yeah. Have you gone out to McDonald's lately? How much it is to actually spend? Whoo! I tell you, I got kids because they love a Happy Meal. That's the reason. McDonald's. But I'm serious, right? I mean, you feel it, right? Well, guess what? I remember the good old days, like 20 something. I'm not going to divulge my age. I'm a dinosaur. Like 20 something years ago, even close to 25 years or to almost close to 30 years ago, the rent that we were paying on a 2-bedroom was only like $650. Okay.
Mine was $300.
Now, can you imagine if you bought a house back then, you're still paying the same amount? This is the big difference. People don't realize, oh, it's so expensive now. Oh, no, wait 20 years from now, see what it looks like. Yeah. I mean, talk to the people in Venezuela, what it looks like over there. I mean, like, it's crazy. I mean, everything just got inflated so much that there's no value in the money. But here's the thing. You got to understand, when you own a property now, over time, it's going to actually create value for you. Well, the same thing with your mortgage. Your mortgage over time gets paid off. That's why people buy multiple houses and get someone actually renting. The reason why is because someone's paying that mortgage for them, and it's lowering the amount over time. So if you want to actually look at your retirement, this is it. Just don't own a home. Start with owning your home and eventually having rental properties. And that's why people have rental properties. I have a client. She bought like 6 properties, mortgaged out. And this is something that my wife and I actually does. We do mortgages. So you can have up to 6 personal mortgages that you can actually work with in terms of investments. And then after that, you need to actually kind of, on average, you can probably do more, but usually the banks look at 6 properties. Most banks are looking at 6 properties, and then you become high risk, right? So she bought about 6 properties and all rented out. And after 10, 15 years, right now with the inflation kicked in, I mean, she said she is doing good. She is doing very good. Yeah. And the last house that she bought was $1 million house. Like she bought it for $750, I think, and that's worth $1.2 million. 2 acres. A former anchorman, like one of those people, those anchor people on the news, used to own that property, and now she owns it, right? So think about it. I mean, our dreams are actually achievable through the mortgage process. Just understand that, okay? Sometimes there's errors and mistakes on your credit report that you don't even realize. It's always good to know those things and understand exactly how to actually kind of fix them. These are the kind of things that we do on the mortgage side of it. Monitor your credit for fraudulent activities. Always do the 2-step verification process on any of your open accounts. Recently, I got a Groupon. Someone hacked into it, and they're about to go to a Mavs game in, I don't know, some Houston, Texas, or whatever. And luckily, I didn't have a credit card. It was my mom's credit card that was on there. So she called her credit card and actually reported fraud. But then it hasn't been redeemed, the voucher, right? So I changed the password, do the two, and I came to realize how important it is to have those two-step verification process where they text you the message. Just make sure that you don't have someone actually end up porting your phone to their name, because apparently I have a hacker, a white, what they call it, a white hat hacker. Yeah, he worked for the government, and he was telling me, he's like, the latest thing nowadays, they actually, like, if you have I think AT&T,
Yeah.
they can actually port your number and take your phone number
With the eSIM.
Yeah, and if they take your phone number, guess what? All your secured verification, your dual verification stuff ends up on their text message.
Oh, heck no.
So this is one of the things but apparently T-Mobile is a little bit better from that perspective. I have no idea, but I'm just giving you guys some idea how your credit can get ruined overnight. Okay, understand how important it is to take steps, even though sometimes it's a pain for us to actually, like, oh, we're gonna have to actually get in here. I need to verify it here. You know what? Take the pain, because someone actually took my Facebook account and had to pay somebody from Norway to actually help me get it back. And we got it back through the business account. So there's a lot of crazy things happening out there that you might not think it's that important, but it really, pay attention to anything that you open, because that's their way in. And then what happens? Your credit gets ruined, and now it's going to be like uphill battle to try to get those things off of your credit. You see how important that is in that part, especially if you don't own a home yet. I mean, you want to make sure that you understand the importance of actually securing your information. So avoid moving home a lot if you can. But this is one thing. Remember, I was mentioning how important certain things was, what we call compensating factors. So when you're changing jobs all the time, or moving all the time, or actually having different addresses or whatever, and it's showing up on your credit report, it affects your credit, because it's always a risk. When people are moving, there's no predictability. Remember, banks look at you and they say, how predictable is this person to pay? So if you're unpredictable, because let's say you're missing bills, not making payments here and there, basically, the more unpredictable you are, the more riskier you become. So employment is very important. Now, here's the thing. You can change employment, but it's always improving, perfect. But try to stay within the field that you're in, because when you start switching fields, then you have to wait like a year or 2 years, sometimes, depending on what kind of loan you're getting on a mortgage, to be able to get a mortgage. So, but moving from, let's say you're a nurse and you move from one nursing position to another nursing position, that's okay. But if you're actually a nurse and you started working in a restaurant, I mean, the bank's like, it's like, what happened to this nurse? Ooh, there's something cookie happening here. So being very, very careful, understanding the importance of being able to show stability and risk. And stability is what the bank's looking for, essentially. Make sense? So importance of good credit. Well, for the mortgage, it increases your chance getting approved, number one, but also favorable terms. The higher your credit score is, the more you can actually get a better interest rate, or a program that's available only for a certain credit score because of the risk. Or down payment assistance. Believe it or not, down payment assistance, people actually tell me, like, oh, I got a friend of mine who got down payment assistance. I said, great. Only problem is your score right now is 570, and barely getting a loan at 580 and getting you to 600. That's what we're going after, right? The minimum on that particular program is 680. So how are you going to get the down payment assistance program? This is the reason why it's important to actually have excellent credit. Now, credit utilization makes a big difference. If you're maxed out on your credit, if you notice your credit score go down when you're maxed out. So do not max out your credit. Make sure you have it under 30%. That's how the banks know that you're managing and controlling your credit. So that's very, very important.
So what is when they have like FDA or something that far?
What
is that?
FD. Okay, okay. Are you talking about like FDA loans, that kind of stuff,
No, it's a
or?
rating for your credit. Like
Oh, you're talking about FICO.
yeah, why is
Yeah.
it?
So there's actually different names for it, but it's all pretty much three different companies are grading you. You got TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian. So those three credit bureaus actually have their own term. Like they coined their own term, like venti for big coffee,
Okay, okay,
Starbucks.
okay.
So that's basically how they have. But essentially, it's a score. Now, here's the interesting part: how come they have different credit scores on each company, right? Well, because some of your creditors only report to one or two, and others report to all three. Not all of them report to all three. So if you actually have a creditor, right? Like let's say a car note. Sometimes they only report to Experian, but they're not reporting to Equifax or TransUnion. So because for them to report, sometimes it costs more money. So why would they report to all three? Maybe they would just want one. Maybe they want two just to make sure to actually like ruin your life. You're not gonna be paying. So it depends. It depends who owns the company that makes a difference, right? It depends on the management and how they want to actually manage the risk and how much they emphasize on paying on time. That if you don't pay on time, what are the consequences? So they also look at that. So some companies report on all three, and others report on two, and others report on one. So that's why you have three different credit scores a lot of the times. Now, remember I was mentioning about 48, 72 hours, we can actually, okay, well, there's cost to each one. For each credit, that something like 35 for the company, at least that we work at, it's like $35. And if you were actually per each credit bureau, that kind of thing, you pay a certain amount of money. And it can go up to $105 or some whatever fee that they're actually charging. They actually have a different different charge based on which credit you're trying to improve. So if you have three credit scores, you're looking at the middle credit score when the bank is actually looking at your score. So when you have a mortgage, you're trying to get a mortgage, and you're looking at three credit scores, right? The middle one is what's important. So when a lot of times when if we want to actually improve your credit, we only need to look at two, right? Because we're going after the middle one. So if we improve both of two and you actually leave one, the middle score could actually go up. So we do all these different scenarios. It's like, okay, which one is the best one to improve? Which is it? TransUnion? Is it Experian? Is it Equifax? That kind of thing. So, and also you have access to that once a year for free. You can go into I think it's by law that you can access your credit report for free once a year. So, but like I said, if you're applying for a mortgage, that's when we can access with your authorization, be able to access your credit score. Now we can do soft pull or hard pull. Let me give you the difference. When companies pull soft pull, right? It gives a glimpse of what you have on your credit, but it doesn't put an inquiry into your credit report. And depends on how long is the time frame. If it's within a certain time frame, the inquiry doesn't really affect your credit. But if it goes beyond in the longer term, they are looking at that and they're saying, oh, this person is applying in different banks. Maybe they're not getting approved. There you go. There's another risk. You see, that's the reason why your credit score go down. So soft pull is actually just to get an idea where you're on your credit. Hard pulls actually are used for approvals. We cannot do soft pull and give you an approval. Whoever lender who's doing that to you guys, is not doing you a service. When the time comes, you want to buy a house, you need to actually pull your credit once. And what's nice about it, I work at Nexa Mortgage, right? And this Nexa Mortgage has access to 200 banks that we can. Yeah, it's a lot of banks. Actually, we went through one of the people that we had a very complicated VA loan because this person had been late twice in the past 12 months, and we're trying to figure out which bank can do it. We went through like 9 banks to actually find one that can actually do it. And then the account representative on the back said, "Oh, it's a piece of cake." I was like, "What do you mean piece of cake?" I do this all the time. I'm like, okay, great. We found someone that does it all the time. So that's my point, right? Accessibility to multiple banks. But guess what? That credit got pulled once. But since we have relationships tied into 200 different banks, now we can actually shop around for you and figure out who can do what and where and what kind of rate, what kind of stuff. So if one bank is actually offering this, I can send it to the next bank without pulling your credit again, only one time, and actually see exactly what this other bank actually offers, or this other bank maybe offers something better, or you need a different type of program that fits for you, right? So what's nice about it is the accessibility. Most lenders out there, they're actually either a correspondent lender or broker, or actually a bank. Those are pretty much the three, kind of scenarios that you're going to have. Well, when you're actually looking at brokers have a certain amount of relationships with a certain amount of banks. Very rare you're going to have a brokerage that actually has 200 relationships. The reason why is the way the owner set this up. We have about 2,000 loan officers across the United States. It's the biggest brokerage in the United States for mortgages. Now, that's their claim. Okay, don't quote me on that because I mean, but 2,000 is a lot of people actually working for one company, right? So there are down payment assistance program out there, but it's accessible through the credit that you may have. Florida Housing Finance Corporation has one, USDA, Rural Development, Federal Housing Administration, FHA loans that has different types of programs within localities. You got VA. VA is actually good if you actually have, if you have military like service that you've done, or some type of you get a VA certificate out of it, you have eligibility of a certain amount. And like I said, this particular person already owns 2 houses, and her eligibility is a certain amount, right? And we're trying to figure out how to get rid of the 2 late payments. So it gets complicated, But what's nice about it is she's well informed. We tell her exactly, okay, this is the direction we need to take. This is what we need to do. And the same thing, I told you, not everything is said and done. I mean, she has a good reason why she was late. So she's contacting the VA and actually trying to tell them, hey, listen, get this thing off of me if you can. I'm doing service here for our country, She was deployed, and so she was late on her mortgage. I mean, I think it's reasonable when you're actually somewhere in Africa, trying to figure out how to pay your mortgage is a little bit difficult sometimes because it's not accessible we're not always accessible. So those kind of things make a big difference in terms of how you explain things to your creditors. So believe it or not, if you have things that's late within the past 12 months and you're aware of it, call your bank. Seriously, you might be able to get the right person and get them to actually kind of remove it for you, if you ever had that situation. So Orange County has it, down payment assist program. City of Orlando has one. Seminole County, Osceola. So you name it, we have all these other programs. Now, what happens a lot of times is they have the program, and then they have the bank that actually is connected to that program. So having this many banks that we work with allows us to actually be able to deal with different programs from different banks. Does that make sense? Not everything will fit exactly the way you want it. It depends on your credit. Like I said, if your credit is actually at less than 600 or 620 or even 640, it's a little bit tricky to actually get down payment assistance sometimes. But there's times that are actually like, if you qualify for like a certain amount of income that you're making, you might qualify for some of those benefits as well. But it depends on where you actually take it. So it's not always from the bank directly. But at the same time, though, we have those, be able to actually maneuver things around. But if your credit is not that high, we need it to get to that point where you can actually benefit from that. So eligibility criteria, this actually talks about, how you're actually going to be eligible for Florida Housing Finance Corporation. Well, guess what, guys? I don't work for them, so to take this with a grain of salt. If you're familiar with this, that's great. But essentially, when the time comes, you guys decided to go into it, we will actually get more information in terms of the qualifications specifically for each program. So for me to sit down and explain this to you, it's probably going to be like, you might as well put a pillow there and fall asleep, because that's what I would be doing myself. So, and then USDA is across the United States. It's not just here, but if how it works in general is you can get like from the agricultural department, be able to get actually 100% program if you qualify for a particular property you're purchasing that's in a rural area. So this kind of promotes home ownership to farmers or people that actually want to live in the farmland or in areas that are actually not really lived in, like unpopulated or not many people living in density wise. So this allows for encourage people to actually move to outside of the suburbs, essentially. So, but this gives you an opportunity to own a home as well in this kind of case. But it's very limiting in terms of location. So, and then FHA loans, there's a lot of requirements. I've seen these things go through. See, the 500 minimum credit score. I've seen really low credit scores. But a lot of times when you start going into the manual underwrite, even though they allow it for FHA, the actual insurance, remember FHA is Federal Housing Administration. It's their insurance. Like if a bank, let's say you are a bank and you said, okay, I want to lend out to her, but then you said, I want to do it on an FHA program. First of all, your bank has to be approved by FHA for you to be able to lend. Number two is basically you follow my guidelines. Let's say if I'm FHA, follow my guidelines. Then when you lend her the money, that whatever you do basically is based on these guidelines. Well, you can do up to 500, but guess what? You might not want to because it's too risky for you. So a lot of banks actually, you can go as low as 500, like FHA saying, oh, this is the guidelines up to 500, right? But maybe you have your own standard and saying like, you know what, I'm not going to lend to less than 620. But some banks are willing to do it less on 580, which I've seen. I mean, we just pushed one through actually at 581, the credit score. But man, don't take it that way because the interest rates are higher. I mean, a lot of the risks are actually being put on there to actually kind of mitigate the risk. And your down payment, the down payment was the same if I was correct, but then they had like 3 months reserve requirement. You have to actually have the ratios actually less than 47%, like in terms of like what you can, like depends on the loan that you get. You can get up to like 50, you can push it to 56, 57, depending on the bank. Some banks only were willing to work with 50%. When I say 50%, your mortgage is 50% of the total amount you're paying monthly, which is huge. I mean, that's really high already, right? I mean, ideally, if you're super, super conservative, you're not going to actually go more than 33 to 35%, or even 40% at the most. That's super conservative. But if you know for a fact that you don't really owe anything or you don't have any, too much obligations or future obligations, and you can afford it. I mean, or you rent out, a portion of your house or whatever, which of course you're supposed to be owner occupant. So you didn't hear that from me in that sense, okay? But the point I'm trying to make is the interest rates are better on primary residences, okay? Because risk again. If you're an investor, if you never own a home first for yourself and then own a home for investment. Some people actually get ahead of themselves and they're like, oh, when I own an investment property, it sounds good to be an investor. Oh yeah, it sounds good. With a 1% higher interest rate, yeah, it sounds good, but it doesn't feel good when you're paying up the money, right? So just be very aware that your first home should be your own home, So that's the whole idea. So for FHA, they have their guidelines. Like I said, I'm not going to bore you to death with that. But for VAs, same thing. They got their guidelines that they work with, and military service is a must that you actually have some type of a certificate. If any of you guys are VAs, I mean, this is something that you could actually take advantage of. And spouses, I think, also of service members actually could be eligible depending on, if there's a deceased spouse or whatever, that kind of scenario, which I've done loans for on that part. Good Neighbor Next Door program. This one allows, like, if you're a police officer or somebody that's actually doing service in the community, it allows you to actually move into properties that you can get benefits of actually not having any down payment, that kind of stuff as well. So I'm just going to go through this because there's a lot of different programs out there. Mm-hmm. And believe me, I want to explain everything to you guys, but I don't work for these guys, right? So I don't want to misinform anyone here regarding that. But when the time comes that you guys are ready, we're going to sit down and we go through the programs that fits your needs.
Yeah.
Okay. That everybody's customized in their own way. And the most important part about this is that we care about the people we work with. It doesn't matter, what kind of income you have. It doesn't matter what kind of work you do. It doesn't matter where you come from, or anything. None of that matters. What matters is you're as human being as you and I, and we actually take care of each other. A lot of our clients, we end up actually calling them brother and sisters because they're like family, and that's what it's all about. I mean, I just had a picnic for my son. Over 100 people showed up, And it's like people from I know from like 20 something years. I mean, we've been friends and we always talk, and but that's what makes this kind of work fun, right? So like going through the Orange County, like I said, same thing. I'm not gonna go through everything on this process, but let me tell you about the application process. This is very important. Okay, so when you go through the process of actually getting your credit pulled, we need to actually have an official application per se, or authorization to pull your credit. And then once we've actually done that, we'll know exactly where you are, and then we look at programs that fits your needs. And what we normally would need, depending on the situation that you have, if you're employed and you get W-2s every year, right? We need 1 month of your pay stub, and usually like 2 months of your bank statements, and your W-2s from 2 prior years. So if today's 2024 and we're actually in June, right? More than likely you'll have your 2023, because usually the third week of January, all employers are supposed to be sending their W-2 out there. So you're going to be getting your W-2s for 2023 and then your 2022. For FHA programs, that's all they need. They don't even need your tax return in most cases. Now, if you have business on the side, that's a different story. That's when tax returns are needed, because the bank wants to know, what are you deducting? It's like you have a business on the side, you have 100,000 income, but then you're actually reporting a loss of 5,000 or 10,000. You cannot use that as an income, right? So that's why tax returns are needed at that point. So if you work as a self-employed or like a consultant, right? You get a 1099, right? So if you get 1099s, the requirements are a little bit different. We do need the tax return, right? And the 1099, your 1099, 2 years of tax returns, and basically your profit and loss statement if you own the company. So, and then the 2 months of bank statement. Now here, simplify everything. If you want to save up for a mortgage, right? And you want to simplify everything so that things doesn't get complicated, have a bank account only to purchase a home. So when you have some money, you put it there, and then you have some money, you put it there, and then if it seasons for 60 days, that money, and you don't have large deposits, it's as easy as day for that particular deposit that you have, the money that you have, to be accounted for. If you have 60 days of bank deposits without having large deposits in it, right? That's a minimal risk for the bank, because they know that's been allotted for that. The reason why large deposit is very important for banks, way back when, that's how like drug dealers were laundering money. They actually dump all their money into the bank account and then use money to pay cash for the house, and then sell the house, and now the money's clean. It's like a laundromat. So for the anti-money laundering scheme that the drug dealers and all these illegal activities are happening, the government said, well, we want to be able to monitor large deposits. So now the banks, when they lend money to mortgages, they lend mortgage to people, they want to make sure that you don't have large deposits that's unusual or a red flag on them, because if they do, then you're going to need to explain where that money came from. And if you cannot explain where the money came from, guess what? They're not going to approve you for the loan, because they don't want to actually mess with that stuff. You see? So understand, large deposit, if it's coming from your paycheck or from your business, understandable, then you just need to show a receipt saying, okay, this person purchased this much from us, so that's why I got this amount of money. Or if you're getting bi-weekly a certain amount of money and it's a big check from your employer, that's reasonable, right? But when cash flows in there, like in the thousands, which is more than, I think, a certain percentage of what you're purchasing, basically, that's they consider a large deposit. At that point, that becomes an issue. So that's what you got to look out for. So the idea there, if you're going to go into like FHA or conventional loan, Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, they have this buyer education program that they ask you to actually get into, mainly because they want to educate you to make sure that you don't mess up, essentially, to minimize the risk. So you know exactly, what you're going to need to be careful with your credit, credit utilization, all these other things, save money, have reserves. I mean, they teach you all these things just because, they want to actually make sure that when you get the mortgage, that you're not just looking at the mortgage, you're looking at your overall lifestyle, that you're not going overboard and then end up losing the house, right? So that's why they got this, this education program. So now the process goes, after you apply, you get a pre-approval, right? Then at that point, when I say pre-approval, by the way, when you work with us, we don't second guess this thing, okay? I personally became a loan officer because I got tired of actually dealing with loan officers who say people are approved when they're not, okay? So years back, I had like 12 transactions fall through with 5 loan officers that I had to fire because of it. That's a lot in 1 year, 2018 or 17. Told my wife, like, look, I was like, get your mortgage license. So she ended up working in the mortgage license business. And so she started actually doing the loans and everything, like about 5-6 years ago. And what I came to realize is the importance of getting things up front. Because some banks, some loan officers are trying to cut costs to make sure they don't spend too much money. So they don't actually do your verification of employment up front, because it costs like $75 to actually be able to get your, especially if it's if it's online, like a particular system, you have to pay money to actually get somebody's employment verification. Or if you get a transcript, it costs money to get a transcript. So some loan officers don't do that until you get a ratified contract. But guess what? When you get a ratified contract, you have a deposit that's risk to be lost if you don't get the property. It's always a risk. People tell me, like, oh, because you didn't get approved, so you should get your money back. Like, good luck when you have a really upset seller actually doesn't want to unload that thing. Both parties have to agree to unload your deposit. What people don't realize, you have a contract, right? But it's only as good as the people following the contract. Does that make sense? So if you have money there in the deposit, and then all of a sudden you're not getting your loan and these people are taking losses, they're not going to sit there and just sign off on that and like give it back. They're going to give you a hard time on it. So that's why it's very important who you work with in this case, because working with the Valerus experts, right, you don't have to actually worry about those things, because what we do is we make sure that you're done with that approval process from the get-go. So when I say approval process, we go through the whole idea of getting a desktop underwriting approval, right? Once we get that, we get all the documents set up, make sure all the documents have been submitted to the bank, right? We do verification of employment. And we do the transcript when it's necessary to do the transcript for self-employed. For employed people, usually the W-2 would be fairly accurate and we don't worry about it as much. But for self-employed people, we need to make sure, the 1099 have been submitted properly, the taxes have been done right, and it match. Because I've seen so many situations where things don't match. And when the things don't match, guess what? It's a problem, right?
That's my case.
Right?
Yeah.
So pros and cons on down payment assistance. The biggest pro, of course, is you have extra money that's being given to you to actually be able to buy a property, so you have less money to come up with. The biggest con out here is the idea of being able to get the mortgage, right? But with a higher interest rate a lot of the times, which I've seen. The rates actually are usually higher on down payment because there's more risk. Less money from you, more risk for the bank. That's why they're asking for down payment. So what's your skin in the game? So if there's no skin in the game, the bank's like looking at that like, oh, well, you know what? This is higher risk. Interest rates a little higher. So all those things ends up being, kind of, one hand washes the other. I guess. Yep. So that's basically what we're looking at. And also the eligibility on different programs. They have eligibility on income, eligibility of certain things, the kind of work that you do, depending on the kind of location. So there's a lot of limitations that doesn't allow you to actually be able to get the home that you want sometimes. So, transitioning from renting to home ownership. I guess you.
That's me.
Yes. Go ahead. It's right
Okay.
here. You can just click on it. It's right there.
Alrighty.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Okay, so I'm going to be talking about transitioning from renting to home ownership, right? Because that's the goal at the end of the day. So there's essentially three things that you want to consider, right? Understanding the strategies for buying your next home, the benefits of home ownership, and also some challenges that you might face, right? Because you want to be prepared. Was it just this here? I'm clicking it wrong.
Okay. I don't know what happened.
Okay, so understanding the latest strategies, right? So there's a process when purchasing a home. So market research and timing, right? So you want to understand the market trend. So there's a difference between a buyer's market and a seller's market. So a buyer's market is when there's more sellers, right? When essentially there's more homes available than there are buyers, and it's more advantageous for a buyer. Versus a seller's market is where there's more buyers out in the market, so it's more advantageous to sellers, right? Like my take on it is currently I've seen that it's a seller's market. Generally for each home that's out there, there's probably about some homes 2 to 3 offers sometimes. So you want to make sure your homes, your offer stands out. But I really see it transitioning right now, right? With the interest rates that are kind of scaring everybody. Some people are kind of staying and saying, hey, I'm going to wait a little bit, right? So I see it really transitioning, and that's a good thing for buyers because once it transitions, you're going to start seeing prices drop a bit on the houses, right? Timing of your purchase. So considering when is the right time to buy. Another factor is election year, right? So this is an election year. So we know that interest rates tend to drop when it comes to election years. So within the next few months, we're going to start seeing the rates change a bit for us, right? And financing strategy. So getting pre-approved. So like Mark said, I've had the same experience where I was working with other lenders and they waited until the last minute to get the pre-approval. Sometimes you're under contract and then they come up and tell you, oh, this person has a tax issue, or we can't verify employment. And now the whole deal gets washed because you didn't do it right at the beginning. So it's very important to get pre-approved and to actually do all of the hard work up front. So that way, when it comes down to buying the house, it's smooth sailings, right? Knowing your different mortgage options. So a couple of things out there with some people that are a little wary of the interest rate right now. There's something called a buy down, right? So there's like a 2-1 buy down and a 1-1 buy down. How those scenarios work is maybe you start out at, maybe the traditional interest rate right now is like 6.75 or 7%. With a buy down, you'd start out maybe at like a 5.6% for the first year. And then the second year would get a little bit higher. And then the third year, it would adjust to, maybe what it currently is. Now, the good thing with that is you can always refinance. Like, for example, some of the clients that I'm working with now, they're getting in, buying the home, and then they're thinking, okay, later on, with being that it's an election year, things are going to change. So then I can refinance later on. And now, instead of getting my house in at, 7%, I'm here at 5%. And then once I see the interest rate start to drop a little bit, that's when I refinance. So the rest of the 30 years, you're all set. So there's definitely different options and things like that. So I tell people that are scared of the interest rate, consider those options, right? Negotiation tactics. So I like to consider myself a pro when it comes to the negotiation. It's very important that you find the right house and you make sure you put in a strong offer, right? So when I say find the right house, there's tons of houses out there, but maybe if you get a house that's been sitting for a little while, or a house maybe that an investor has and they're ready to get rid of it, you'll be able to get more opportunity there, right? So you definitely want to make sure that you can get in and get the right house. And also when it comes to putting in an offer, there's different tricks and tactics that we use to make sure that we can get you approved, whether it be a seller's market or a buyer's market, right? And then there's various home buyer programs that Mark talked about. There's another Hometown Heroes. They just put more funding into that. And then there's actually one that was done by Governor DeSantis. They just put more money into that. That's for people who live in Florida. As long as you work at least 40 hours, then, that down payment assistance is there for you. Now, there are pros and cons to that. Sometimes with those down payment assistance programs, the interest rate is a little bit higher, but it's free money at the end of the day. So if you have that credit score, might as well just go for it, and then you could always refinance later, right? So there's different tricks and things here. I think I'm going backwards. Let me see. But bear with me, guys. This clicker is new to me.
Benefits?
Yeah, benefits of home ownership.
What page is that?
This is right after understanding the latest strategies. Okay, so and then if you go to the next one, and then one more, there it is.
This one.
A little transitioning. Yeah, I think mine is an updated one. So essentially what I'll be talking about is the benefits of home ownership, right? Because the thing to understand is there is a difference between renting and owning. So, you know, Mark talked about it, right? And I see people posting memes all over social media where, you know, you can be paying $2,500 and rent for this, or you can get that paying $2,500 and it's a mortgage, it's your own home, right? So there's a lot of benefits to home ownership. I pretty much focus on 6 when I talk to my clients. So the first one is tax savings, right? So the government, right, they allow, they give you a lot of benefits just for owning a home, right? A lot of tax deductions and things like that. So that's one benefit. Appreciation, right? So when you buy a car, right, you drive it off the lot, the value goes down. When you buy a house, traditionally speaking, the value goes up over time, right? So I know, like with me, for example, my house that I purchased, that's my retirement. I plan on, you know, after I'm done paying my mortgage, I plan on selling my house and living overseas, right? So there'll be a lot of, you know, equity there for me. So I'll be able to do that, right? And then that brings you to the third point, equity. It's pretty much the difference of what the house is worth and what you have owed on it. So that difference in between from all the appreciation. And that money, you can use it, you know, let's say you want to get a line of credit, something happens, you know, an emergency, you need that, you can use it. Or let's say when you go ahead and sell your house, that's all that extra profit that you'd made right there. The fourth one is roots. So traditionally speaking, people generally stay in the house for, you know, 4 times longer if it's their home versus if they're renting. And this gives them an opportunity to connect with the community, right? Know your neighbors and just kind of like be like, this is my place, this is my family, you know what I mean? And education, believe it or not, traditionally speaking, children that live in a home get better test scores, go to better colleges than children that are, you know, living in a rental, right? And happiness. So at the end of the day, it's your home, right? If it's an apartment, you have to worry, oh, I can't paint this. I want to change this. I want to do this. I want to do that. If it's your home, you could essentially do as you please, right? Some restrictions, right? You can't get too wacky, but for the most part, yeah. Okay. And then we're here with the common challenges. Okay, so the most common things that you know, people face as first-time homeowners is number one, affordability, right? Everybody gets stuck in, how am I going to afford a house? I'm where I'm at now, and I have no idea how am I going to get there, right? So kind of the second, what Mark said, we are, you know, the way that we like to work is we're just like you, right? Our goal is to get you to the finish line, to get you the keys at the end of the day. And we'll do whatever it takes to get you there, no matter how long it takes. We'll even help you to make the plan, right? We just got to follow it bit by bit and we'll get there, right? And then you can enjoy those benefits, right? So there is a, you know, even though you might think it's far-fetched, there is a way to be able to afford a home, right? And also prepare for unexpected costs. When you are in the home buying process, there's other costs that you want to consider. You're going to have to pay, you know, closing costs. You're going to have to pay for the inspector, property taxes, appraisal, and things like that. But getting all that information up front will allow you to better budget and plan so you're prepared for it, right? So we're all about preparation and making sure everything is done in the beginning so we can get you to the finish line, right? And then credit issues, right? So a lot of people start off with not having the best credit. So they're just like, okay, what am I going to do? My credit, I was talking to a guy the other day, his credit is 400. And he's just like, yeah, how am I going to get to where I need to be, right? And again, it's just about setting yourself up, making a plan, which will help you with, and then we just go about that month to month. We have another guy that we're working with, and he kind of had a whole bunch of, issues where he had he was doing so well, his credit was fantastic, but then he had gotten into a car accident, and then the car company didn't want to pay for the car, and now he's belly up on the car. And Mark and I, we've been working with him for a few months now, and finally he's at the point where his credit score is a 580 now, from where it came from, and pretty soon, within the next couple months, he's going to be ready to purchase a home. So, we do this all the time, and we're definitely happy to help. So credit issues, no problem, right? And finding the right property, right? So understanding the market, kind of like what I was saying before, is important. You want to know what kind of market you're in, so that way how do I put up the offer, and how do I, how can I make sure that I'm putting up a competitive offer, right? So understanding the market, and hiring the right inspector. For me, my inspector is like my right hand, right? Because whenever we go in and we put in an offer for a house, we generally put it in at a good offer that's going to, make the seller happy, make them want to go ahead and move forward with us. But then we use that inspection as a way to kind of get a little bit more money, get a little bit more seller's credit, make that house a little bit lower, because the inspector goes in and he pretty much checks everything, right? And with him doing that, we can actually use all the pointers that he finds, so that way we can get some more money. Okay. And believe it or not, right? I'm not sure if you guys know, but you can actually earn maybe 100,000 or more over a 3-year period just by buying a home, right? Yeah, for sure. So one thing you want to consider is market appreciation, right? So understanding equity, right? Like what we spoke about, understanding how you can, what types of houses maybe are going to have more equity than other, like new construction, for example. You might go to an area that is more so of a rural area, and they're just building up. Well, in a couple of years, once they build up those homes, they build up the businesses around them, the house is going to be worth more money, right? Also, smart renovations, energy efficiency, right? I always advise everybody, go energy efficient, right? Because that's something, yeah, exactly. Solar, one of the things, and there's so many little things that you can even do that are even less costly than solar. And even with President Biden, he had put out something this year where he's given homeowners up to $40,000 to cover the solar cost. So sometimes it might even be free. No, it's real. It's actually real.
In some areas.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's not in all areas.
Yeah. And make sure that make sure you're talking to the right solar people too.
Yeah.
I'm sure some of them are scam.
Okay.
But energy efficient, and also adding value, right? Whenever it comes to renovation. So certain things like kitchen, bathroom, those are going to help, the house to be worth more, right? So thinking of those things, essentially.
I got a question.
Tell me.
So my biggest thing is HOA.
HOA, everybody's is.
Can you buy like your own land, or can you buy something that you don't have to deal with the HOA?
Oh yeah, for sure. I know the community I live in is no HOA.
That's what I want.
You can actually filter for that even on like sites like Zillow and things like that.
Yeah, she can get you that.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
What, do you have some crazy plans you want to do in the neighborhood?
I mean, I want my family to be able to enjoy it.
Yeah.
I mean, you got somebody telling you, and then I seen something on the news that lady got behind in a mortgage or something. But anyway, she had kids, and every little thing that happened with the woman after being late on the HOA, they started picking on her kids.
Oh man.
So what happened was they sold it from under her and didn't even send her no notification. They sold the house from under her.
Yeah, they can do that.
We came together, and the person that bought it was like, "Yo, get this move back her house."
Yeah, they can do that.
Let her rent the house. And it was like, it's hers. They didn't even see no kind of notification or nothing, like it was an illegal transaction. But I don't want to deal with it. I'm sorry. I just don't, because I heard if you got to stay in the
It's preference.
Yeah.
How you want.
I've seen some people that, you know, they have people come over and visit. They park on the wrong side of the road, and now the HOA send the
Yeah.
to get towed.
Yeah.
It's
Oh,
crazy,
goodness.
you know.
I've
So,
had that happen to me.
oh, you
My
have?
car actually in the place that I live in actually got towed. Yeah. What?
Yeah.
When I was actually yeah.
Oh wow.
Just
HOA
that
for
fact,
you.
yeah, that's HOA. I mean, there are benefits.
Yeah,
It
some
depends where-
people like it because they like, you know, the nice and manicured,
Yeah.
nice lawns and everything. Everybody's keeping up with everything. To each its own. Yeah.
And I just feel like if a person got to spend the rest of their life paying on something, who is another adult telling
I
them what
know,
they
right?
can
Right.
Exactly. I know what you're saying.
I would
Exactly.
flush the HOA out.
I know, right?
Yeah. I got too many kids. I got 8 kids. Everybody gonna pull up, and then where they gonna park it? Oh, my
Right.
kids wrong.
Oh,
You know, we
yeah.
got the party, sing, and have a good time. If ain't too many people, these my kids. They ain't gonna believe it.
Right.
You got like what, 20, 30 people at your house? It's like, you gotta think about it. I got
Everybody's getting told.
I got their wives and husbands.
Yeah,
That's a lot of people.
for sure. No, I totally agree. Right? And that way we'll be able to find you that house that you like. We'll get your criteria, and then we'll also send you property. And making an offer, right? So we always want to make sure we make a competitive offer. There's different tricks and things like that when you're making an offer to make your offer stand out. Because if you're in like a seller's market and maybe 3 other people want that same house you want to make sure you're with a realtor that's going to make sure you can lock in and get that house, because you don't want to be disappointed, right? So we use several different tricks and things to make sure that we can, you know, put in a competitive offer, right? And then home inspection and appraisal. So the home inspection is more so like safety and security, making sure that everything in the house is up to code and everything is up to the mark. And then somebody like me, I use that to be able to negotiate, to make sure that when you get into that house, you already have some equity, make sure we get it at a good price for you, right? And then from there, it's the appraisal. That's pretty much where the bank comes in and says, okay, this is what the house is worth. And they want to make sure that whatever amount that they're lending you is what the house actually is worth. For the inspection, those generally start around $250, can go up to, I've seen them go up to like $400. And for the appraisal, that's about $300. I've seen them go up to like $500, even $600 sometimes, right? And finally, it's closing. So we always do a final walkthrough. So just in case in the inspection, we found some things that, you know, the seller needed to change, we go through, make sure that everything that they needed to do, they did. The house is how it's supposed to look, because you don't want to go close on the house and then now you find out, hey, there's a hole in the wall that I didn't even notice it was there, right? So we'll do the final walkthrough, and then lastly is closing day. That's when you get your keys, and you know, that's when you can celebrate and take all the nice pictures and things like that, right? Okay. So there's 7 major pitfalls, right, when buying a home. Let's see if I can get this done. Okay, thanks, Mark. So skipping the pre-approval process, right? We talked about that a few times. You don't want to skip that, right? Not budgeting for all costs, right? The worst thing, and I've seen this on social media, right? The girl, she's it's like a meme. She buys her house and everything, and then she's in there with just a mattress, right? Because she didn't, she didn't plan ahead. She didn't think, hey, I'm gonna have to get movers and furniture. She's in a big old house and she's just laying there on a mattress, right? So you want to make sure that you budget for all different costs, and that's part of planning, right? Which we do at the beginning to make sure that you know what to expect, right? And then ignoring market conditions, right? So whether it's a seller's market or a buyer's market, you want to know, right? Because you want to use that to your advantage, right? And overlooking inspections. So inspections, essentially safety and security. So you want to make sure you don't overlook something. There might be something with the septic tank or something, major that got overlooked, and then now this is the house that you're living in, your family is living in, and then you have an issue, right? So it's definitely important to make sure you go with a qualified inspector and you review that report with your realtor, and you make sure you know what you're getting yourself into, right? And failing to negotiate. Why would we ever do that, right? That's what I'm here for, to make sure that we negotiate and put you in the best position. My track record is generally all the houses that I've helped purchase so far, I've always gotten my clients some kind of equity. They get into that home with equity. We get the house for less than what it's worth, right? So that's just something that I'm proud of, that's something that our team's been able to do. And making large purchases before closing, right? So you might think, oh, everything's good. We got pre-approved. I'm ready to get my house. Now let me go and buy this, go and buy that. You want to avoid that. So during that period, right, even though you get pre-approved, during that period when you're purchasing the home, you don't want to do anything, right? You want to make sure you keep your credit clean. You want to keep an eye on everything, make sure you're still budgeting and you're still going down that right path so you can get to the finish line, right? Because you don't want any hiccups coming up and then now you're stuck, right? And not understanding the loan terms. So it's very important that you're working with a lender that you can relate with and that you understand what you're getting yourself into. Because at the end of the day, there are ways, like let's say you get behind and different things like that, like Mark spoke about, but at the end of the day, it's, your obligation to make sure that you're paying your mortgage. So you want to make sure you understand all the terms and you're clear on everything, right? Okay, so that's pretty much it. So now if anybody has any questions about the process or anything, it's open for questions. Any questions? I think you guys asked your questions throughout. Tell me. So I know with Mark, you do a lot of the credit repair and things like that. I know from our side, we do the credit repair as well. How much does it cost? It's about $129 from our side, right? And then that will kind of get you in. We'll make sure that that's a month, right? And that'll kind of get you in. We'll make sure that, we're keeping up with the credit and helping you to improve. Now there's, a quick way and then there's a longer way, right? So yeah, exactly. Exactly. So
no, it's actually more quicker.
Yeah.
When we don't say, are y'all more expensive?
Not necessarily, because we're not the one making money off of it. It's the actual company.
Yeah.
So she's got a company that she works with that actually does the monthly things with credit. We have actually a company through the mortgage company that actually allows to assess everything that needs to be done, and then we give you that information. But then when we actually need to report these things, you can submit it to us, and it's as if you're submitting it to the credit bureau. You can report directly. That's the difference.
Right.
And I know that, a lot of clients, right, that Mark works with, that need help with credit, he's, on top of it. And I know some clients, even you kind of help them out as part of them working with you to get their, credit repair. So that's definitely a good opportunity.
Wherever you need to go with your credit. It depends on how quickly you want to timeline wise, really what it boils down
Yeah, I
to.
want
Because if
mine
your lease
quick.
is if your lease is expiring a certain time, we need to actually get it done quicker. So there's many ways to do this, but we don't make money. Our company itself doesn't make money from it because we actually have it directly sourced directly to the credit bureau. So some of these credit bureaus that actually pull credit, they have like what if scenarios and stuff like that. And we can actually go through it with you, like together, so you can see like, okay, this costs this much. It's like shopping at Amazon.
Yeah, exactly. So
I don't make money from the Amazon, right?
so essentially there's no fee from our side, right? So we're not going to charge you anything as part of working with us. We won't charge you anything. Now the costs that will come are from the actual company,
The
right?
vendor.
The vendor. Yeah.
You have a question?
What, so who's negotiating? Will I have to negotiate to bring down those amounts or just
What I would recommend is let's sit down and then we'll go through everything and show you exactly what can be done. And a lot of times your creditors and your company, your banks, won't allow us to talk to them because it's your account, right? So, and it's a much better scenario if I give you the information and the insight exactly how you maneuver, because then they don't think that you're getting help from someone, and then you actually get what you're looking for.
Right. And then we work together in that way. So with Mark's side being the lending side and my side being the real estate, more so the realtor side, we work together in that way because when Mark lays out that blueprint and says, this is what you need to get done, my team can also help out, to make calls for you or on your behalf if you allow us to kind of help the ball get rolling. So Mark makes the blueprint and the plan, and then we can help you to get it executed if you don't know, hey, what do I call and say, or what do I do, or
Yeah.
I'm busy
Right,
at
yeah.
work,
I have done
you know what I mean?
Put it this way, during the time the market crashed, I've actually was able to help families, like giving them advice in terms of what they could be talking to the banks about. Like 86 families were able to keep their house.
So that's a good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't charge them anything because this is not a service I was providing to make money off of. So, and in doing so, basically, I got referrals from those people that I've actually helped over the years. So, yeah, it's very good to understand how this whole system works, but most of us won't know unless you're submerged in it. And I happen to be submerged in it because I was helping people actually keep their home, and if they can't keep their home, they have to short sell the property.
Mm.
Some people didn't have a job to even have a mortgage to begin with,
Yeah.
right? So people got in trouble like that, and the property's so upside down that we can't really do anything about it. So, and the banks weren't willing to actually cooperate for theirs, or some of them actually went to short sell, some of them would try to save. So there's certain percentage that went into different buckets. That's what happened. But that experience alone taught me a lot. That when I'm actually sitting down with people, I'm able to actually really push their scenarios to improve.
Right.
And that's
So at the end of the day, it's just boiled down to coming up with a plan and executing it, right? Step by step.
So what do we
and
start?
knowing.
Today.
Already.
Yeah. There it is. Exactly.
Yeah.
After this, we're not a big group here, so we can actually do a one-on-one with you.
Okay.
At some point, maybe either tomorrow.
I went live and I got like 20 people already talking about where's this at? Because I do nails and I have my own suite and I have like a lot of followers, so I can like